Hey everyone, welcome back. Day 3 of Hey Nostradamus. When last we left off, Cheryl was telling us about the shooting, had started about the shooting, and how the three grade 11 boys had come in wearing their duck hunting camouflage outfits and started shooting. And they were clamored under the desks like a 1960s nuclear drill when everyone was worried about the Cold War and the Soviet Union dropping bombs on us. Okay, so we're going to start on page 15 in the book, right there after 3 asterisks if you're in the PDF, right where we left off yesterday. Okay, here we go. This is still Cheryl now. In the summer between grades 11 and 12, after my conversion and after landing Jason, I had a summer job at a concession stand at Ambleside Beach. It was a dry, hot summer, and the two other girls I worked with were fun. Kind of skinny and nutty, and they mimicked their customers quite wickedly. They also didn't go to Delbrook, so they didn't have any history with me, which was a relief, and I felt guilty feeling this relief. Youth Alive was concerned that my constant exposure to semi-clad skin, sun, and non-Youth Alive members would make me revert to the world, as if listening to screaming babies and groping for the last purple popsicle at the bottom of the freezer bin could be a test of faith or tempt me into secular drift. Lauren and Dee and some of the others visited me a bit too often, and I don't think a night ever went by without returning to my car at Ship's Inn and finding an aliver eager to invite me to a barbecue or a hike or a spirit cruise around the harbor. By the end of that August, Jason was going mental for me. He came into the city on weekends from his job up the coast, surveying for a mining company. A sample conversation from this period might go, Cheryl, God would never have made it feel so right or so good unless it was right and good. Jason, could you honestly hold your head up and say to Pastor Fields or your mother or the Lord that you'd been fornicating with Cheryl Ann Way? Could you? Well, of course he couldn't. There was only one way he could land what he wanted, and that was marriage. One weekend in my bedroom, he said we could get married after his graduation. I removed his hand from near my right breast and said, God doesn't issue moral credit cards, Jason. He's not like a bank. You can't borrow now and pay later. My strength. Cheryl, I'm losing it. Then pray for more. God never sends you a temptation that you aren't strong enough to overcome. I did want Jason, but as I've said, only on my own terms, which also happened to be God's terms. I'm not sure if I used God or he used me, but the result was the same. In the end, we are judged by our deeds, not our wishes. We're the sum of our decisions. Now, let me say this right here. When we get to the end of Hey Nostradamus, your project is going to be a large threefold part thing. One of them is going to be taking quotes from different parts of the book and saying who said the quote, what it means, why it's important to the overall novel, and why you like it. So if you find things that you think, hey, that's a good quote, or I could really use that later, I like to just like the way that sounds, underline it now. Circle it. Put a post-it note. Actually, don't underline it. It's my book. Right? Don't. If you have my books, don't write my books. Write it down somewhere. Put a post-it note in the margin. Something. This is a really good one. And write down what page number it's on so you can find it again, or at least what section it's in. Who said it? This is Cheryl, and this is a good one. We're the sum of our decisions. Think about what that means. We're the sum of our decisions. That we are the product. Of all the things that we've done in our lives, of all the decisions we've made, of all the little choices we've made in all the things we've undertaken. All right. During none of my lunch hour confessions, whether at the White Spot Drive-In eating fries with a bunch, or at an Alive weekend seminar on kingdom building, did I ever once confess how much I needed Jason in every sort of way. Even thinking of him made me drunk, and all the teenage girl stuff that came with it. Bees needing flowers, wanting to dissolve like sugar into tea. Sorry. Of course, everybody else in the school was going at it like minks. Nothing was forbidden to them, so why not? It's indeed a mistake to confuse children with angels. And while the ever-present aura of casual sex saturated the school like locker aroma, I didn't surrender to my own instincts, though I really did have to wonder why God makes teenagers so desperate. Why could we see Archie and Betty and Veronica on dates at the malt shop, but never screwing around in Archie's dad's basement covered in oil stains, spit, and semen? Double standard. You can't do one without implying the other. Preachy me. Dear Lord, protect our children while Lord, keep them sorry, I can't pray right now. Dear God, what's hardest here is that I simply can't believe this is happening. Why do you make certain kinds of events feel real but not others? Do you have a name for this? And could you please make all of this feel real? Remember, these are the prayers that she's hearing from people on earth. As I was saying, silence. In the first few moments of the attack, I remember briefly seeing a patch of sky out the window, and I remembered how crisp and clean the day was. Then one of the boys shot his gun in that direction and stemmed the exodus. I know nothing about guns. Whatever they were powerful, and when they cocked them, it sounded industrial, like a machine stamping something flat. Under the tables, we all dove. Thump a thump a thump. Don't shoot at me. I'm not making any noise. Look at how quiet I'm being. Shoot someone else over there. Shoot me? No way. I could have stood up, shouted and caused a diversion and saved 100 people, or organized the lifting of our table to create a shield to ram into the gunman. But I sat there like a meek little sheep, and it's the only thing I've ever done that disgusts me. Silence was my sin. I sinned as I cowered and watched 3 pairs of ochre-colored work boots tromp about the room, toying with us as though we were bacteria under a magnifying lens. I recognized all the boys. Working on the yearbook is good for that kind of thing. There was Mitchell Van Waters. I remembered seeing him down at the smoke hole by the parking lot with his fellow 11th grade gunmen, Jeremy Kriakis and Duncan Boyle. So now we know the 3 names of the shooters: Mitchell Van Waters, Jeremy Kriakis, Duncan Boyle. I watched Mitchell, Jeremy, and Duncan walk from table to table, take away the combat fatigues, and they look like the kid who mows your lawn or shoots hoops in the driveway next door. There was nothing physically interesting about them, except that Mitchell was pretty skinny and Duncan had a small port wine birthmark inside his hairline. I knew about this only because we'd been looking at photos as part of a paste-up and layout during art class. As the 3 walked from table to table, they talked among themselves. Most of what they said I couldn't make out. Some tables they shot at, some they didn't. As the boys came near to us, Lauren pretended to be dead, eyes open, body limp, and I wanted to smack her, but I was just mad at myself, perhaps more than anything, for being afraid. It had been drilled into us that to feel fear is to not fully trust God. Whoever made that one up has never been beneath his cafeteria table with a tiny thread of someone else's blood trickling onto their leg. One contradiction of the human heart is this: God refuses to see any one person as unique in his or her relationship to him, and yet we humans see each other as bottomless wells of creativity and uniqueness. I write songs about horses. You make owl-shaped wall hangings. He combs his hair like some guy on TV. She knows the capital city of every country on earth. Inasmuch as uniqueness is an arrogant human assumption, Jason was unique, and because of this, he was lovable to me. First off, he was terrific with voices, ones he's made up and ones he mimicked. As with the girls from my summer job, I was a sucker for anyone who could imitate others. Jason, with even one beer in him, was better than cable TV. He used his voices the way ventriloquists use their dummies, to say things he was too shy to say himself. Whenever a situation was boring and there was no escaping it, dinner with my family or party games organized by Pastor Field's wife that incorporated name tags and blindfolds, Jason went into his cat character, Mr. No, an otherwise ordinary cat who had a Nielsen TV ratings monitor box attached to a small black and white TV. Mr. No hated everything and he showed his displeasure by making a tiny, almost sub-audible squeaking meow sound. I guess you had to be there. But Mr. No made more than a few painful hours a treat. Now, let me say this. There are going to be things in the book that maybe while we're reading you think, why is she talking about that? Why is she getting all these tiny details? Who cares if Jason makes noises, right? Well, all of it comes full circle, and it's all going to be important. These voices are going to be extremely important to the rest of the book. You won't see how at first, but you will see. It'll all tie in together. So there's nothing irrelevant. There aren't facts added here that you're not going to need later. It's not filler. Trust me, it's really not. This is a condensed book of a well-written page turner of a story that is pretty dense with some information, but it all is important. Okay? All right, so let's go back. Jason could also wiggle his ears, and his arms were double jointed. Some of his contortions were utterly harrowing, and I'd scream for him to stop. He also bought me 17 roses for my 17th birthday. And how many boys do you know who do that? I was surprised when Jason did propose in his dad's Buick on a rainy August afternoon in the White Spot parking lot over a cheeseburger at an orange float. I was surprised first because he did it, then second because he'd concocted a secret plan that was so wild that only the deadest of souls could refuse. Basically, using money he'd stockpiled from his summer job, we were going to fly to Las Vegas. They live in Canada, remember. There in the car, he produced fake IDs, a bottle of champagne, and the thinnest of gold rings, barely strong enough to retain its shape. He said, "A ring is a halo for your finger. From now on, we no longer cast 2 shadows. We cast 1. Fake IDs? I asked. I don't know the legal age there. They're for backup. I looked and they seemed to be convincing fakes with our real names and everything, with just the birth dates changed. And as it turned out, the legal age was 18, so we did need the fakes. Jason asked me if I wanted to elope. No big churchy wedding or anything? Jason, marriage is marriage, and if it were simple as pushing a button on the dash of this car, I'd do it right now. What I didn't go on about was the sexiness of it all. Sex, finally, plus freedom from guilt or retribution. My only concern was that Jason would develop chilly feet and blab to his buddies or Pastor Fields. I told him that blabbing would be a deal wrecker, and I made him vow under threat of hell conditions that this would be our secret. I'd also recently been reading a book of religious inspiration geared mainly to men, and I dog-eared the chapter that told its readers, essentially, to trust nobody. Friends are always betrayers in the end. Everybody has the one person to whom they spill everything, and that special person isn't always the obvious person you'd think. People are leaky. What kind of paranoid creep would write something like that? Well, whoever it was, it helped further my cause. The important thing is that we were to marry in the final week of August in Las Vegas. I greased the skids at home and told my folks I was attending a hymn retreat up the coast. I told Lauren and the Alive crew I was driving to Seattle with my family. Jason did the same thing. It was said. Now it is an interesting thought, right? That if you don't want something to get out, you don't tell anybody because you have your person. But what if your person doesn't feel like you're their person, right? So John tells Steve, and John thinks, well, Steve's my guy. I can tell him everything, and he won't tell anybody. But Steve says, my guy is, Josh, and Josh won't say anything. I'm afraid to say anything to anybody. So he tells Josh, and then Josh tells his one person, and so on and so forth. And now it is spread. And at the beginning, you're thinking, I just told my one person. How could it get out like that? If you don't want somebody to know something, don't tell anybody. All right, more prayers that Cheryl hears. Dear God, I'm trying to take my mind off the slayings, but I don't know if that's possible. I'll forget about them for maybe a minute, and then I'll remember again. I tried finding solace looking at the squirrels in the front yard, already gathering food for the winter, and then I got to thinking about how short their lives are. So short that their dreams can only possibly be a full mirroring of their waking lives. So I guess for a squirrel, being awake and being asleep are the same thing. Maybe when you die young, it's like that too. A baby's dream would only be the same as being awake. Teenagers, too, to some extent. As I've said, I'm grasping here for some solace. Hey, baby. Lord, I know I don't have a fish stick or whatever it is I'm supposed to have on my car bumper, like all those stuck-up kids who think they're holier than thou, but I also don't think they have some sort of express lane to speak to you, so I imagine you're hearing this, okay? I guess my question to you is whether or not you get to torture those evil bastards who did the killings, or if it's purely the devil's job and you subcontract it out. Is there any way I can help torture them from down here on Earth? Just give me a sign, and I'm in. What I now find odd is how Jason and I both assumed our marriage had to be a secret. It wasn't from shame, and it wasn't from fear, because 18 is 18. Well, almost. And the law is the law. So in the eyes of the taxman and the Lord, we could go at it like rabbits all day as long as we paid our taxes and made a few babies along the way. Sometimes life, when laid out plainly like this, can seem so simple. What appealed to me was that this marriage was something the two of us could have entirely to ourselves, like being the only two guests in a luxury hotel. I knew that if we got engaged and waited until after high school to marry, our marriage would become something else. Ours, yes, but not quite ours either. There would be presents and sex lectures and unwanted intrusions. Who needs all that? And in any event, I had no picture in my head of life after high school. My girlfriends all wanted to go to Hawaii or California and drive sports cars and, if I correctly read between the lines in the yearbook questionnaires they submitted, have serial monogamous relations with youth alive guys that didn't necessarily end in marriage. The best I could see for myself was a house, a kid or two, some chicken noodle soup at 3 in the afternoon while standing at the kitchen sink watching clouds unfurl coastward from Vancouver Island. I was sure that whatever Jason did for a living would amplify us both. Wow. Well, let me try that one again. I was sure that whatever Jason did for a living would amply fulfill us both, an unpopular sentiment among girls my age. Jason once half-heartedly inquired as to my career ambitions, and when he was certain I had none, he was relieved. His family, churchier than thou, looked down on girls who worked. If I was ever going to get a job, it would only be to annoy them, his parents, his dad mostly. He was a mean, dried-out fart who defied charity and who used religion as a foil to justify his undesirable character traits. His cheapness became thrift. His lack of curiosity about the world and his contempt for new ideas were called being traditional. Jason's mother was, well, there's no way around it, a bit drunk the few times I met her. I don't think she liked the way her life had played out. Who am I to judge? How the two of them procreated a sweetie pie like Jason remains one of God's true mysteries. Back to the shooting now, okay? If nothing else, relating the step-by-step course of events in the cafeteria allows me to comprehend how distant from the world I'm feeling now, how quickly the world is pulling away, and for this reason I'll continue. After the first dozen shots, the fire alarm went off. Mitchell Van Waters walked to the main cafeteria door, said, "God damn it," and fired into the hall, blasting out the bell ringing there. Jeremy Kiriakis took out the cafeteria's fire bell in 3 shots, after which a hail of drywall particles pinged and rattled throughout the otherwise silent room. Beneath the tables, we could still hear fire bells ringing from deep within the school's bowels, bells that would ring past sunset since the RCMP would hold off on disabling the central off switch for fear of tripping homemade bombs placed throughout the school, bombs made of benzene and powdered swimming pool cleaner. Wait, how did I know that combo? Oh, yes, Mitchell Van Waters' contribution to the science fair, getting the most bang for your buck. It was in the last year's yearbook. The RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So that's what they're talking about when they say RCMP. Back to the cafeteria. Back to me and 300 other students under the tables, either dead or playing dead, scrunching themselves into tiny balls. Back to 6 work boots clumping on the polished putty-colored linoleum and the sounds of ambulances and RCMP cruisers whooping schoolward, a little too little, a little too late. I began doing a numbers game in my head. 300 people divided among 3 gunmen makes 100 victims per gunman. If they were going to kill us all, it would take a bit of time, so I figured my chances of making it were better than I'd first supposed. But geographically, we were in a bad spot, the center of the room, the visual and architectural core of the place, as well as the nexus of any high school social ambition and peer envy. Were people envious of Alivers? We were basically invisible in the school. A few students might have thought we were small-minded and cliquish, and to be honest, Youth Alive members were. But I wasn't. In general, as I walked about the school, I affected a calm, composed smile. I did this not because I wanted to be everyone's friend or to avoid making enemies, but simply because it was easier and I didn't need to interact. A bland smile is like a green light at an intersection. It feels good when you get one, but you forget it the moment you're past it. Dear Lord, if you organized a massacre just to make people have doubts, then maybe you ought to consider other ways of doing things. A high school massacre? Kids with pimento loaf sandwiches and cans of Orange Crush? I don't think you would orchestrate something like this. A massacre in a high school cafeteria can only indicate your absence, that for some reason, in some manner, you chose to absent yourself from the room. Forsake it, actually. Cheryl, the pretty girl who was the last one to be shot. She wrote that in her binder, didn't she? Got us nowhere? Maybe she was right. 1 second. Dear God, I'm out of prayers, so that just leaves talking. It's hard for me to believe that other people are feeling as intensely as I do and as bad as I do, but then if we're all as messed up as I am, that scares me into thinking that the world's all going to go to pieces. And what sort of world would that be? A zoo? I keep to myself mostly. I can't sleep or eat. TV stinks. School's closed for a while yet. I smoked pot and it wasn't a good idea. I walk around in a daze and it's like the opposite of drugs because drugs are supposed to make you feel good. But this only makes me feel bad. I was walking down at the mall and suddenly I started hitting myself in the head because I thought I could bash away the feelings. And the thing is, everybody in the mall looked as if they knew what I was doing, and no one flipped out. Anyway, this is where I stand now. I'm not sure this was a prayer. I don't know what it was. I've not been too specific about my life and my particulars, but by now you must have gleaned a few things about who I was, Cheryl Anway. The papers are blanketing the world with my most recent yearbook photo, and if you've seen it, then you'll know I was a cliche girl next door, darkish blonde hair cut in a way that'll probably look stupid to future students, with a thin face and, on the day the photos were taken, no pimples. How often did that ever happen? In the photo, I look old for 17. I'm smiling the smile I use when passing people in the halls without having to speak to them. The description accompanying my photo was along the lines of, quote, Cheryl was a good student, friendly and popular, and that's about it. What a waste of 17 years. Or is that just my selfish heart applying standards of the world to a soul that's eternal? It is, but by 17, nobody ever accomplishes anything, do they? Joan of Arc, Anne Frank, and maybe some musicians and actresses. I'd really like to ask God why it is that we don't accomplish anything until we're at least 20. Why the wait? I think we should be born 10 years old and then after a year turn 20. Just get it over with like dogs do. We ought to be born running. Chris and I had a dog, a spaniel named Sterling. We adored Sterling, but Sterling adored gum. We'd go for walks and all he'd do was sniff out sidewalk discards. It was cute and funny, but when I was in grade 9, he ate a piece of something that wasn't gum, and 2 hours later he was gone. We buried him in the backyard beneath the witch hazel shrub, and I put a cross on his grave, a cross my mother removed after my conversion. I found it in the garden shed between the 520 and 20, in a stack of empty black plastic nursery pots, and I was too chicken to ask her why. I don't worry too much about Sterling as he is in heaven. Animals never left God, only people did. Lucky animals. My father works in the mortgage division of Canada Trust, and my mother's a technician in the medical lab. They love their jobs. Chris is a generic little brother, yet not as snotty or pesky as my friend's little brothers. Chris is Cheryl's brother. Chris is Cheryl's brother. That's a good question. Cheryl Anway and Chris Anway. He's going to be important later as we come back to. They're right now. It's Cheryl and Jason. Cheryl and Jason are main characters right now. At Christmas, everyone in our family exchanged bad sweaters, and we all wore them as a kind of in-joke. So we were one of those bad sweater families you see at the mall. We get along with each other, or we did until recently. It's like we decided to be superficially happy with each other, which is fine, and that we wouldn't share intimacies with each other. I don't know. I think that lack of sharing weakened us. Dear Lord, I pray for the souls of the three killers, but I don't know if that's right or wrong. It always seemed to me that people who discover religion have both lost and gained something. Outwardly, they'd gained calmness, confidence, and a look of purpose. What they'd lost was a certain willingness to connect with unconverted souls. Looking a convert in the eyes was like trying to make eye contact with a horse. They'd be alive and breathing, but they wouldn't be 100% there anymore. They left the day-to-day world and joined the realm of eternal time. Pastor Fields or Dee or Lauren would have pounced on me if I'd ever spoken these words aloud. Dee would have said something like, Cheryl, you've just covered your halo with soot. Repent now. There can be an archness, a meanness in the lives of the saved, an intolerance that can color the view of the weak and of the lost. It can make them hard when they ought to be listening, judgmental when they ought to be contrite. Jason's father, Reg, always said, love what God loves and hate what God hates. But more often than not, I had the impression that what he really meant, love what Reg loves and hate what Reg hates. I don't think he imparted this philosophy to Jason. Jason was too gentle, too forgiving to adopt Reg's self-serving credo. As my mother always told me, Cheryl, trust me, you spend a much larger part of your life being old, not young. Rules change along the way. The first things to go are those things you thought were eternal. Okay, that's about 22 minutes. That seems like a good place to stop here. So we're going to stop right here on page 28 with the 3 asterisks before she talks about her going to Nevada to get married. And let me leave you with what although Cheryl's mom may have been jaded and cynical there, some of that's true. You spend a lot longer being an adult than being a kid. And right now, talking to my high school kids here, right now you seem like it's going to be forever before you get out of school. Well, I would say that normally. Now it seems like forever you're going to go back to school, or so you can graduate. But this isolation is going to go on forever. I know we're in the midst of something. It seems like it's so long, and being a kid is hard. I was just talking to my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter. Well, the whole family. We had a family meeting about how hard the job of becoming is. Growing up is hard, and when you're a kid, you feel like no one listens to you, and you're not valued. You're not as important. Trust me, I do value you. I do think you're important. You have a lot to say. I understand that. And your experiences are just as valid as mine. But when you're young, you feel like you're stuck here forever. But trust me, you spend most of your life as an adult. You spend 9/10 of your life as an adult and having to do all kinds of different things. This will go by in the blink of an eye. You'll look back and go, wow, remember high school? Remember when we were young? And you'll be 53 like me and thinking, my goodness, over half my life is gone. How did that happen? All right, so we'll pick back up here next time. Miss you all. Love you. Hope you're staying healthy and doing well. We'll come back tomorrow for day 4. All right, see ya.